Hello, today's video we were going to talk about how to graph a linear equation. So first of all, how to graphing and the slope. A graph represents a visualization of the solution of an equation. So usually when it comes to linear equation, it's going to be a line. When it comes to quadratic function, it's going to be a parabola. But today we just talked about linear equation, so that means it's going to be a straight line. So in figure 3.1, this is a coordinate plane. On our upper right is going to be quadrant 1, and then we do it in counterclockwise, and then quadrant 2, down is quadrant 3 and quadrant 4. So in here, plot each order pair, identify the quadrant in which the order pair lies. Okay, so this one, we call it order pair. We will have x coordinate and the y coordinate. Now when we label it, we have x is our horizontal axis, y is the y-axis. So when x equals to -2, and then y equals to -5. So the point would be here. This is our point A. When x equals to -2, y equals to -5. So our second order pair, point B, is 3. I'm going to use different color of pens. Oops. So the second order pair is going to be B, 3 and -3. So when x equals to 3, and then y equals to -3 would be here. This is a point B. Always remember, the first number represents the x coordinate, and then the second number represents the y coordinate. So this is in which quadrant? So a point B is in our fourth quadrant, right? Quadrant 4. Okay, next. C, again, let's change another color. C is -1 and 5, which is in here. -1 and 5, because our x is on -1, y is on 5. So this is in quadrant 2. Very good. Okay, so now let's do E and F. I'm going to skip D because I believe that you can do it now. So E is 4 and 2. When x equals to 4, y equals to 2. So here is our D. And then we have E -1. Oh, sorry. E is, let me use the red one. E is 0 and -1. So when x equals to 0, that means it's going to be on the, what, in here, this is x equals to 0, and then y equals to -1. So this is our E, which is on the y-axis. Whenever x equals to 0, the x coordinate equals to 0, it's going to be on our y-axis, because that makes sense, because that's when x equals to 0. And then our f is 2, and then y equals to 0. I'm almost running out. Let me use black. So I have 2, 0. So this is our point F. So F is going to be on our x-axis, our horizontal axis, because our y coordinate equals to 0. I forgot to label these. So from the example 3.1, with the point E and F, we could see these points did not lie into the quadrant, but on an axis. This special point on the graph are called intercepts. So x-intercept means the point intersect with axis, right? So which point is going to be our x-intercept? Will be our point F, right? So similarly, y-intercept means what? The point intersect with the y-axis. So that means our point E is our y-intercept. Neither one of these points are on the quadrant. Okay, so graph by plotting the points, making the t-table. Okay, so t-table is this one. We will have x, and our y is equal to 3x minus 2. And then we find out our y is equal to what? So let's say if x equals to 0, our y is going to equal to 3 times 0 minus 2. 3 times 0 equals to what? 0, right? 0 minus 2 is negative 2. And then if x equals to 1, y equals to 3 times 1 minus 2. We replace x equals to whatever variable it is here. So in here is equal to 1. So after you find x and y, we will have our order pair. We will have 0, negative 2. When x equals to 1, y equals to 1. Of course, you don't have to use x equals to 0 and s equals to 1 all the time. You can use any number that you need. But since our coordinate, look at x, you can of course use 10, 100, that also works. But our coordinate is from negative 5 to 5, that's the range. So we want to keep it within the range, otherwise you will unable to plot the point. You see what I'm saying? For example, you can use 10. So when x equals to 10, we have 3 times 10 minus 2, which is 28. So our order pair is going to be 10, 28. So it would be outside of the coordinate. It exists, but it's hard for us to draw it. So, okay, after we've done this, we need to label the point. Let's do the first two one. 0 and negative 2, which is on the y-axis. The second point is 1 and 1, which is here. Now, these 2 points are on the line of this equation, y equals to 3x minus 2. So when we connect these, this straight line is going to be the graph of our linear equation. Remember what we talked earlier? In here, a graph represents a visualization of the solution to an equation. So this line is the visualization of this equation. Okay, let's do another example. So we have y equal to 1/4 x minus 3. Again, we make our t-table. Oh, let me separate these further. Okay, so what do we pick x? We can pick 0. Why I like to pick 0? That's the strategy, because 0 is easier to calculate, right? Because everything times 0 equals to 0. Everything at 0 equals to the number itself. So that makes the calculation easier, because 1/4 0 minus 3 is going to equal to 0 minus 3, which is negative 3. So our order pair is going to be 0 and negative 3. And then, of course, there are other number really easy to calculate, such as 1, right? So if we do 1, we have y times 1/4 times 1 minus 3. So now we have a fraction minus a whole number. We can still calculate that, but I know that you don't like fraction. So what we can do, we can try to find some number that we can get rid of the fraction, such as, pause the video and think about by yourself, such as 4, because y equals to 1/4 times 4 minus 3. 1/4 times 4, they cross cancel. This got you 1. 1 minus 3 equals to -2. So your order pair would be 4 and -2. And then you can use other one too, such as 8. And then when x equals to 8, y equals to 1/4 times 8 minus 3. 1/4 times 8, they cancel, cross cancel, therefore 2 remain, and 2 minus 3 equals to -1. So you have 8 and a -1. So you can choose anything you like. But again, like I said, you try to choose something that within the range, which is in our case, is 5 to -5. So we will pick the first two, 0 and -3, 4, and then -2. And then we connect these 2 points together. Here is it. That's our equation. Okay, next one. Okay, so next one is you see x and y, they're both on the left side of the equation. So the easy thing is you want to move y in one isolated y and then move the other elements on the other side. So okay, I want to move x to the right. So in that case, I need to minus x on both sides. So I have -y equals to minus x minus 3. And then next is I have a negative sign. I feel uncomfortable to see a negative side in front of the y. So what you would do is you multiply -1 on both sides. So you will have what? -1 times y is y, and then -1, you multiply the whole thing. Right? It's not just multiply the x, you want to multiply the whole function. So that's why you need to put the parentheses in case you mess up. So when -1 multiply everything inside the parentheses, you will have x plus 3. Okay, after that, easier to draw a t-table. So I have x, y equals to x plus 3, and x and y. Again, you try to pick some easier number. You can pick 0.5 or 0.8, 1.22. That also works. Again, I tend to like whole number. So again, I pick 0, y equals to 0 plus 3 equals to 3. So I have when x equals to 0, y equals to 3. Second number, let's pick -1. Y equals to -1 plus 3 equals to 2. So I have a -1 and a 2. So now we plot in it. We have a 0 and a 3. The second one is -1 and a 2. Now we can connect these two dots together. Now this 9 is what? You can either write x minus y equals to -3, or you can write into the transformed form, which is y equals to x plus 3. These two are equal. You can write either way, but I would prefer x equals to x plus 3. Y equals to x plus 3. Okay, so next we were going to talk about how to obtaining the slope of a line from its graph. So the slope of a line is the measure of the slope of steepness. So if the number is bigger, your line will be more steep. If the slope is smaller, it tends to be more flat, more close to horizontal line. So the slope usually is in between 0 to 1. or 0 to -1. Okay, if it's positive, it's going to be look like increasing. If it's negative, it's going to look like on the other direction, which is decreasing. We will talk about that later. Oh, I'm sorry, the slope can go above 1 and -1. As long as they're positive, the slope is going to be going up, increasing. If the slope is negative, it's going to be going down. Okay, so how do we denote the slope? We use the letter M to denote the slope. So when we define the slope, that's the definition, the change in y over the change in x, which is rise over run. So here is example. Find the slope of the point by the given line. So what would do is you find 2 points. Any given 2 points will give you the slope by using our formula. So now let's take a look. Which point would you pick? I mean, you can pick some point like that, but this is really ambiguous because you don't know what exactly the point is. You know that, okay, x is 1, but what about y? It looked like a 2.5, but you can also say it's 2.4. It's ambiguous. You want to pick something that more defined, such as this one. It's really obvious that it's at 0 and 1. And then we'll pick another one that is really defined, such as this one. When x equals to -2, y also equals to -2. Okay, so now how do we find the slope? Remember, the slope is equals to the change in y over the change in x. What's that mean? So let's label, remember in the order pair, the first letter would be x1, the second would be the y coordinate. Since this is our first point, we limit s1 and y1, so we don't confuse with our second point. This is our second point, so we name the x coordinate is x2, and the y coordinate is y2. So the change in y would be y1 minus y2. That's how much they change from y1 to y2. And then the change in x is x1 minus x2. So y1 is what? 1. y2 is -2. Remember, it's subtract. And then x1 is 0, x2 is -2. So now we can calculate that. We have 1 minus -2 is 3, and 0 minus -1, -2 is 2. So the slope of this graph is 3/2. Okay, similarly, we do the same thing for the second one. Okay, second one, the defined one, I would say here, this one, 0, -3, and also this one, 2 and -4. Also, this one is also defined too, -4 and -1. Or this one, -2, -2. So you can pick any of these two among these four, because these are the most defined one. Okay, so now I'll just pick maybe these two. Any one that you pick, they will end up have the same slope. If they are not, that means you do some calculation wrong. Okay, so let's pick our x1 and x2. Either one of these can be x1, x2. It doesn't have to be this is x1, y1, and the other one x2, y2. You can switch it. It doesn't matter. The left one of the order pair is always the x coordinate, and the right one of the order pair is always the y coordinate. So again, when we calculate the slope, we have change in y over the change in x. So y1 is -3 minus -1 over 0 minus -4. So remember, we're subtracting a negative number. So we have negative 3 plus 1, which is negative 2, over 4. So we have negative 1/2. Remember, if I talked about that earlier, if it's a negative number, the graph is going to be decreasing, which is in here, it's decreasing graph. Okay, so find the slope of this given graph. Well, one is the horizontal line. We pick random 2 number, negative 3, 1, and 1, 1. Okay, so we have x1, y1, x2, y2. So with y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2. y1 equals to 1, y2 equals to 1, x1 equals to negative 3, x2 equals to 1. So I have 0 over negative 4. 0 over negative 4 equals to what? 0. So that means what? When it comes to a horizontal line, our slope is equal to 0. What about a vertical line? So again, we are going to pick 2 number, any 2. So please pause the video and try to do it by yourself. Okay, so welcome back. So our slope is equal to y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2. So this is going to be our s1, x2. Even for me, I always want a neighbor. So label x, which one is x1, which one is s2, so I don't get confused in the later. So y1 is 3 minus 1. x1 is negative 2 minus negative 2. So I have a 2 over 0. Can 0 be in the denominator? No, right? So this one means it's undefined. So undefined means what? When it comes to a vertical line, there is no slope. The slope is undefined. Okay, so how do we obtain a slope from 2 points? So by what we just did earlier, it's similar. This one, they give you a line, and in here, this one gives you 2 points. Okay, so the first thing you would do is you find out which one is x1, which one is y1. You can define any one that you like. So in our previous example, I always talked about, hey, we use x1, y1 minus y2, x1 minus x2. In fact, they can swap the order. You can use y2, the second point minus the first point, but they have to be the same. If you're doing this, hey, on the top, I decided to use y1 minus y2, and then in the bottom, I decided to use x1 minus x2. It won't work. It has to be the same. If you decided to use the second point to subtract the first point, you need to keep it the same for both coordinates. So in here, you label these 2 points. Decide which one you wanted to be x1, which one you wanted to be x2. And then our slope is equal to y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2. So our y1 is equal to 2 minus our negative 1. Don't forget the parentheses, because if you forgot, you may end up to have a 2 minus 1. That will give you a different answer. And then x1, we have negative 4 minus 5. Okay, so this slope is equals to 3 minus 9, which is negative 1/3 if you simplify it. Okay, so please do B and C by yourself. I'm going to pause the video and do very quick. Okay, so after you neighbor the function, you will end up with what? Negative 1 minus 5, and then 2 minus 2. Okay, so we got negative 6 over 0. So remember, you can have the denominator equals to 0. So that means this slope is undefined. That means these 2 points is going to form a vertical line. Very good. That's something that we just talked about earlier. So let's take a look at our C. So now this time I'm going to use y2 minus y1, x2 minus x1. So y2 is -1 minus -1, x2 is 8 minus 2. So on top is equal to 0, on the bottom is equal to 6. So the slope of the third pair is what? 0. 0 divided everything is equal to 0. So that means what? This is a horizontal line. So here's the recap. Vertical line have undefined slope and horizontal line have a slope 0. Okay, that's it for this video. So I'll see you next time.